In 2021, the Institute for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies is celebrating its 60th anniversary and its ranking as the #1 university-affiliated regional studies center in the U.S. Founded by Kurt London in 1961, a time when communist ideology was regarded as the West's main enemy, the George Washington University's Sino-Soviet Institute's first mission was to research the Sino-Soviet relationship in close collaboration with the DC policy community. Scholars at the Sino-Soviet Institute helped to shape our understanding of communist politics in important ways. For example, Carl Linden's research on Nikita Khrushchev laid out the case for a conflict model of Soviet leadership politics and became a classic in the field of Kremlinology.
So this early 1962 was my first trip to the Soviet Union. I was there between the erection of the Berlin Wall in early 1962 and the Cuban Missile Crisis at the end of 1962. But on both ends, Berlin and Cuba, it wasn't a very good time, but it worked out. I saw Khrushchev and his whole Politburo at the opera one night. I saw Shostakovich over there having breakfast. I couldn't resist going over and thanking him. And he was very, very humble, pleasant.
From 1972 until 1989, the Institute was directed by Gaston Seeger, who also served as the Director of Asian Affairs on the National Security Council, the Special Assistant to the President for Asian Affairs, and the Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia and the Pacific during the Reagan administration. Through his work for the U.S. government, Seeger played a critical role in helping the U.S. to win trade concessions from Japan and encourage democracy in South Korea. At the Institute, Seeger helped to establish a rare connection with the USSR thanks to close ties with Soviet scholars who specialized in China, Japan, and Korea. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War in 1991, the Sino-Soviet Institute was split into two parts: the Center for Asian Studies, which was named in Seeger's honor, and the Institute for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies, which focused on Russia and the post-Soviet successor states under the leadership of James Millar. As an economist whose key interest was in centrally planned economies, Millar led an influential House Intelligence Committee panel designed to review the CIA's estimates of Soviet economic growth and defense expenditures from 1970 to 1991. This panel's conclusion that the CIA had greatly overestimated Soviet defense expenditures and that the agency should have collected more input from outside sources resulted in important changes to the CIA's future data collection processes.
My connection to the IERES began in 1989 when I became a professor of political science and international affairs at GW. That's about the same time Jim Millar, who was soon going to become an especially close friend and colleague of mine, moved to GW to be the head of IERES and a professor of economics. We both believed, like most of the other IERES scholars, that a strictly realistic sort of scholarship should be applied to the USSR, i.e., we should not get carried away analytically by Mr. Gorbachev's enthusiasm for change, nor be deceived by Mr. Yeltsin's false professions of democracy.
I came to George Washington University in January 1994. I came as a professor of political science and international affairs and was thrilled to be connected to IERES right away. The director, Jim Millar, was incredibly welcoming, and it was such an amazing community. People like Peter Reddaway working on Russia, Carl Linden as well, who had been such an amazing Soviet expert and then continued on after the end of the Cold War. Sharon Wolchik working on Central and Eastern Europe, Mike Sodaro, working on Germany and other issues more broadly about Europe. It was just a really wonderful group of people to welcome me and help me get oriented to Washington, D.C.
In the 2000s, the Institute continued to build on its strengths by launching the GW Cold War Group, a community of faculty and graduate students who work closely with the National Security Archive and the Cold War International History Project to build our understanding of the Cold War and its implications for current policy issues. The Institute also expanded its focus to include the European Union, which was emerging as an increasingly important actor in shaping European economic and foreign policy initiatives.
The main thing that happened at IERES while I was director was a real focus on expanding and disseminating information about the Cold War. We did several things at IERES in order to highlight this and really put IERES on the map, on the global map, as being one of the top places to come to understand the history of the Cold War and its legacy. And one of the key ways we did that, aside from our own scholarship, was training students. There was a cohort of faculty who were experts on the Cold War. That included Jim Goldgeier, Jim Hirschberg, Greg Brzezinski, and myself. And we started two things to train students about the Cold War. One was the annual Graduate Student Conference, the Summer Institute on Conducting Archival Research. This was a one-week program in the summer to train doctoral students in how to conduct archival research all over the world on the Cold War.
In order to better prepare students for professional careers dealing with Europe and Eurasia, IERES merged its two previous existing MA programs, the program on Russian and East European Studies and the program on European Studies, into one MA program in European and Eurasian Studies. Given the interconnected nature of Europe and Eurasia, the retooled IERES MA program was designed to give students a comprehensive overview of interactions and politics across the two regions. IERES has taken advantage of its location in downtown Washington and continued working to bridge the gap between scholarship and policymaking. In 2010, this included bringing Ponar's Eurasia to the Institute. The program on new approaches to research and security in Eurasia is a premier network of international scholars working on transnational and comparative issues facing the post-Soviet space.
I was fortunate enough to be director of the Institute when it was in a period of great dynamism with a lot going on in the world and also at the Institute itself that made it a very exciting place to be for these years. Perhaps what stands out most for me is that we had the opportunity during this time to bring in a lot of truly outstanding new colleagues who went on to perform leadership roles and just constitute a great core of energy and innovation and original scholarship at the Institute, as well as more broadly community that just made it a really stimulating place to be. It was during this period, for example, that we were able to bring in Marlène Laruelle, who is currently the director of the Institute. Also Bob Ortong, Soufiane Jemukhov, Sébastien Pérouse, Corey Welt, all of whom served as professors and most of whom are still here as professors. And it's just been an amazing experience interacting with them over the years and talking about all things related to current events and theory as it pertains to this part of the world. Another really exciting opportunity was the chance we had to bring Ponar's Eurasia to the Institute. Ponar's Eurasia stands for Program on New Approaches to Research and Security in Eurasia. And since it has come to GW, it's been co-funded both by the university and by Carnegie Corporation of New York, which has supported it for a quarter of a century now. which is pretty amazing. So it's a program with a great pedigree, and it has two missions, or two parts to its mission that align very well with the mission of the Institute and the Elliott School more broadly. The first of which is to connect academics to each other, build community among academics working in both North America and post-Soviet Eurasia, including not only Russia and Ukraine, but other countries of that space. And secondly, it is to connect that academic community to a broader policymaking world, which basically means anybody who is interested in important questions of the day.
In 2012, the Institute launched its Central Asia program. The program promotes high-quality academic and policy-oriented research, as well as the cultures of Central Asia, organizing unique photo exhibitions and film screenings, which now became an essential part of the Institute's daily activities.
When I became director in 2012, the most important challenge that I realized at that point was that there are many powerful parts in the Institute, but they were acting more like a federation. They were not really integrated with each other. And then when the Central Asia program began to grow, and it was really, in the beginning, it was very small, and then it began to really blossom like quite astonishingly. And then the Arctic program and so on, this became more and more of a challenge to make sure that these are not islands in the stream, but that they all have something in common and work together. And the director's main and I would say kind of noble challenge was to keep that thought of togetherness alive, right? We had the Georgian president there, we had the French president there. This all started with IERES, right? The initiatives began with IERES, and then they went to a higher level, and so on and so on. So, the Central Asian program actually started early on with, a musical program, and then a film club and a film series. And we had more and more cultural events, photo exhibitions, and so on. And this kind of cultural component was probably less emphasized, before, and it now has become an integral part of what the Institute is. So I would say because the Institute is so big quantitatively, but also qualitatively, the challenge is to keep all the parts together and keep alive the notion of togetherness.
IERES was my first choice because this institute is the world-class institute that does cutting-edge research in political science and about the Euro-Asian region. I had an outstanding academic experience. First of all, I was honored to work with Professor Sharon Walczyk, who greatly helped me to finalize my book project on the impact of great power politics in Georgia. In this research, I provide the reader with a deeper understanding of the impact of democracy and autocracy promotion on the process of democratization and regime change. IERES impacted my research in many different ways. I had access to rich libraries, archival materials and data, met and interviewed American foreign policymakers and experts, scholars with a rich experience and expertise in the field of post-Soviet democratization.
Today, the Institute is organized around 6 programs, which help to further consolidate the Institute's status as a highly visible academic and policy-oriented institution in the Washington, D.C. area. It sponsors Eurasia and the Central Asia program that we already mentioned, as well as the PETRAC program on Ukraine, the Arctic program, the Transatlantic program, and the recently launched Illiberalism Studies program. IERES is also the only institute at the Elliott School that is home to such a wide range of publication. These include 3 peer-reviewed quarterly journals, Demokratizacja, the Journal of Post-Soviet Democratization, Central Asian Affairs, and the Journal of Illiberalism Studies. We also have several websites that provide information and analyses frequently used by other scholars, government analysts, NGOs, and classroom instructors. The Institute is also the only one that publishes in multiple languages, including Russian and Uzbek.
Today, IERES serves as a field-defining leader in scholarship, education, and advice for policymakers addressing relations between the United States, Europe, Russia, and Eurasia. This accomplishment has been achieved through combining academic rigor with policy engagement, promoting interdisciplinary perspectives, and recognizing that Europe, Russia, and Eurasia are best understood in relation to one another as well as to larger global and historic trends.